Michael Figured, Conversations.
All right. Hello, Davide. How are you?
How you feel? Very good, very good. And you?
Yeah, also good. Also good. Actually, I
Yes.
prepared a little introduction to you so that people kind of know who you are,
Yeah.
and then we can start a conversation and get going. All right. It's kind of a little
Yeah.
poem, so you can tell me if you like it afterwards or not. Um, Me, Davide, professor in neuromarketing and founder of ICense by day. Conversations with him always spark joy. Don't worry, it's not all work and no play. When he's not working, he also likes to drink beer and play pool. His skills do make me look like a fool. Publications about free will are plenty, that's for sure. But let's quickly move on from the intro and talk some more.
It's a. I think there is room for improvement, but it's a good draft, a very good
Yeah,
draft.
all right. Yeah. Well, I wanted to do some kind of intro because I've seen people do it on other podcasts as well, but I still
Yeah.
have to find my own little twist about
Your
it.
personal touch. Yeah.
Yeah, the personal touch. Yeah, that's true. So I've mentioned that you are in neuromarketing or you're a neuroscientist actually. So where does your fascination from neuromarketing come from actually?
Uh, well, it's actually it's relatively recent in the sense that I've always been interested in understanding how people, yeah, why people take the decisions they take,
Mm-hmm.
how they reason, how they think, how they feel. But it was always more in the abstract, in a way. There's always been in the abstract. And only in the last, let's say, 5 years, I realized that I wanted to start working in a bit more applied
Mm-hmm.
context. So to apply neuroscientific knowledge and psychological knowledge to to let's say to real problems or to more concrete problems. And almost, well, I wouldn't say by chance, but uh, some events happened that I got in touch with a neuromarketing startup in Ghent
Mm-hmm.
while I was doing when I was a researcher at Ghent University. And then I was, to make a long story short, I was convinced to quit academia, to make the jump outside academia, and to start working in this neuromarketing startup.
Mm-hmm.
And there, I slowly got really passionate about the topic. I had, I think, a bit a biased view before on neuromarketing, and now realize now that it's much more interesting than what I thought, and it's getting more and more interesting. Actually, it's the let's say that the sector is very broad, very wide.
Would you
Um,
consider it a new sector, or is it something that has existed for a very long time at this point?
well, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't say it existed for a very long time, but it's a few decades now.
Mm.
But before, I think at the beginning, it was very much focused on, let's say, traditional marketing sectors, such as advertising, for instance,
Yep.
um, branding, and so on. And I have the feeling that nowadays the neuromarketing people, or neuromarketing practitioners or professionals more in general, are applying the same principles to a much wider range of domains. Communication more in general, that includes also, for instance, what we are recently been exposed to everyone,
Mm-hmm.
to how the regulations about the COVID and the pandemics are communicated.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, that's actually one
uh,
of your blog posts, I think, on the iSense website is
yeah,
about COVID and some of the biases that arise in these kind of
yeah,
situations. Is this something you also
yeah,
still have, like even
yeah,
when you know them, the biases, or can you?
yeah. Because the main idea about neuromarketing, the way I see it, is uh, people and consumers consumers. Let's say that we talk about consumers or citizens more generally. We always say that they are in a way, to a large extent, they are irrational and they don't behave in a logic way. They don't behave in a rational way. But these elements of irrationality are predictable. So we know that people have what we call psychological shortcuts or biases that allow us to make very quick judgments, very quick decisions, but that are sometimes not accurate. And so you can use these biases.
Are there biases that are, sorry to interrupt you, are there biases that are good in some way? Or because you mentioned that they are not good in this case?
I think, let's put it this way. I think most of the biases are there because they helped the human being to go through evolution. So they are, if they exist, it means that they have a function. That's the way I see it. So actually, most of the times, they are very useful and they allow us to make, to make very quick decisions. It's really important for our survival. So to have these shortcuts, it's really helpful. But sometimes they make us neglect very important pieces of information. So I will say that in general, let's say 99% of the cases, they are very useful, they are accurate. Sometimes they are not accurate. And we're not, the thing is that we don't know that we are not accurate. So we are not completely aware when we make, a very irrational decisions, or that we are completely ignoring some pieces of information. We don't know we are ignoring those information. So it's very difficult to adjust our behavior accordingly.
In the article, you mentioned two biases, so the optimism bias and the availability bias.
Yeah.
So can you explain them a little bit? And maybe it would also be interesting to know, like, even if you know the biases, if you could overcome them. Like, you probably know a lot of the biases, like scientifically, and why they happen. Is that a way for you to not have those biases anymore, or how does it work?
Yeah, well, so to answer first the second part of the question, I think it is it's very difficult to overcome them. I mean, I teach these biases every day in class, and I just went to the supermarket and I bought items that I didn't need just because they were on promotion. So I'm also a very bad example in the sense that I'm completely vulnerable. I know I'm vulnerable to this. Let's say marketing techniques, let's call it like that, which are based on the human biases. So I think it's you can sometimes overrun them, and you can go against these biases, but on the long run, we all are driven by biases, I think. One example is the optimism bias that you mentioned. Well, it basically refers to the idea that we kind of overestimate our good chances. So we believe that we are, when something happens, we are inclined to believe that it won't happen to us. So we are over optimistic about our own behavior, about our own situation. So in this case of the pandemics, our brain, for some reasons, underestimates the chance that it will happen to us. We always think, okay, it will happen to the other people. If you think about it, it's very functional to have this bias, because this allows you to still behave, to still function, to still go out, to still keep a positive mood. So it has a lot of good functions, but sometimes it's also dangerous as well.
Would you say, so the optimism bias is like good for short-term kind of events, I guess, so that you don't get stopped in your tracks and just continue? But if there are problems that are occurring over a long period of time, like for example the pandemic, then it might not be as good of a bias to have.
Well, it's not really about the time length. It's more about the fact that we it's, of course, let's say talking about the pandemics, it's still very unlikely. I mean, if you look at the numbers, it's still very unlikely that we get infected. Well, not very unlikely. It's still unlikely.
that we get infected or that we die from it? Because, I mean, infection is kind of, I don't know the exact numbers, but infection is quite high, kind of, if we didn't go into quarantine and so on.
Yeah, of course. What I'm saying is that if I go out and have a walk alone, I mean, and if you pay attention, the likelihood it's relatively. I mean, it's not 100%. It's relatively low. It's not very that low. I mean, it's quite. It's not impossible to get infected. Actually, it's very possible if you don't pay attention. But your brain or the brain of people tends to underestimate this chance to get infected. So in your mind, you say, okay, but if I pay attention, I will nothing will happen to me, and therefore you get into very dangerous situations.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So the optimism bias just prevents you to being cautious when it's actually necessary, right?
Yeah.
And the study, so for the COVID blog post, was there some neuroscientific research involved, or is it like theories that you described?
No, yeah, it was more in that case of the blog. I don't think I mentioned any research. It was more, let's say, my interpretation of some events that were happening at the beginning, like I think it was in March or April, so at the beginning of the pandemics in Italy. Some politicians in the, they were clearly underestimating the impact of the virus, and they even encouraged the population to go out and have the aperitifs and then go to drink. So that was, I think, a good example of the optimism bias. You didn't at that point in time we didn't have all the information that we have now, but somehow these politicians were expecting this to remain a very minor problem, and that was, I think, a good example of this bias.
Yeah. The book made no, not the book. The blog made me think of two books actually, and it's probably because the heuristics and biases are, I guess, not invented by them, but talked a lot by them. First one is Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow by Daniel Kahneman, and I don't know if Tversky is on it. But Tversky and Kahneman also have written the book Heuristics and Biases, I think, but that one is on my e-reader because it's a very large book, I think. Is this basic knowledge for anyone in neuroscience, or?
No. That is the I think maybe the most influential book on the topic. They are actually Kahneman was let's say the pioneer of what we call behavioral economics. So it's not really about neuroscience, but it's more about psychology and behavioral economics. But that's a very, I think that should be the Bible of all the people who want to work in neuromarketing or who want to operate in this field.
That's the book you have to read a chapter of each night before you go to bed, or?
Yes, and you have to know it by heart.
All right. Oh, I guess in the case of heuristics and biases, that's quite a lot of work to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you mentioned before, so you started off as a researcher, more of like abstract things that you research and then you got into more applying all the things that you learned then. And you also mentioned that you are lecturing right now.
Yeah.
So A, where do you lecture right now? And B, do you prefer lecturing over researching or the other way around?
So right now I have, I'm teaching two courses at the Ghent International Business School in London. One is about neuromarketing, and the other one is, which I will start in January, It's market research and consumer behavior, so they're quite related topics. And this year I was visiting professor in Ghent for the course of buying behavior. And I'm also teaching with my more with companies and well, it's more about training actually other professions. That's what we do with ICense. We do training and education in companies with professionals who want to learn about neuromarketing or who want to apply internally the neuromarketing principles. So that's the first question. The second question was about whether I prefer lecturing over research. I would say, well, it's none of the, well, I maybe prefer lecturing right now because I did research for a long time. And lecturing gives the possibility to, I think, broaden your understanding of the topic, because in order to be able to teach, you really need to master a certain topic, and therefore you are pushed to really go to have let's say to embrace a certain topic, be able to transfer it, to deliver it to an audience, and that really strengthens your knowledge about the topic.
You have to know your stuff well, I guess, because when people start asking
questions,
otherwise, yeah, I can imagine it can get quite hard if they go really into depth on certain topics that specifically they are interested in, and that you probably know a lot of things, but not everything is your complete expertise, I guess. So yeah, I can imagine that.
But also I think what I'm let's say exploring, it's what I see also is the trend in lecturing is the traditional lecturing. When there is a lecturer or a professor who speaks and transfers knowledge, it's becoming I wouldn't say obsolete, but there are many other techniques or many other strategies that are in use now. For instance, the idea of a flipped classroom, where the concept of flipped classroom.
Oh, the students have to stand in front of the class and explain topics themselves? Or?
No, it's more like, so let's say the traditional classroom is where you deliver concepts during the class, and then people do, let's say, homeworks at home. In the flipped classroom idea, people study at home, so they read articles, they watch videos, or they read blog posts, and then you use the time in the classroom to discuss and have an exchange on their work. They do workshop in the classroom. So I think is much more interactive way to teach. The level of knowledge at the end of the course is much higher, I think, both for me as a teacher and for the students, of course.
So it's more project based, and
yes,
they learn from actually doing the project, and then studying theory behind it.
Yeah, basically, as a professor, you have much more a role of support and a coach them, and they have to be much more proactive.
Yeah.
Which it's more, in a way, it demands more from them, but it's also more engaging, more entertaining for them. That's what I see.
Do you still see advantages over the old kind of way of teaching, or is it completely
I mean, what I do is a bit of mixed method. I do think that, especially on the things where the teacher is an expert. Just thinking about, my case, when I present neuromarketing cases, or when I present research that I was the main investigator, I think there is an added value of a delivery like me, having a lecture, because you transfer insights that are not easily that you cannot easily capture by reading a blog post or an article.
Oh, okay. Because you did the research behind it and you kind of compressed it all into something. Yeah, you do have a lot of publications. Do you know how many times you have been cited so far?
I stopped checking that. I don't know. I stopped checking that because yeah, it's since I quit. Well, let's say since I quit academia as my main source of income and activity. Um, I stopped checking it. Last time it was a bit below 1,000 or something,
Okay, okay.
900.
Yeah, you have over 1,000 citations right now. I just checked.
So I went over the 1,000.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah,
Okay.
and actually you can also see a graph, like how many times you were cited, and over the years it's just, yeah, it's always increasing as well. So
Yeah.
I guess that's good. I haven't, nah, yeah, but I don't know if that's considered a high number or a low number, but
Well, it depends what's the your standards are. I think the most cited psychologist has something like 30,000 or maybe even more, maybe.
okay, but if that's the highest one, then 1,000 is already pretty good, right?
Or maybe it's even 300,000. I'm not sure.
Okay, okay.
Yes,
Well,
but it's exponential. It's exponential. So going from maybe 1,000 to 10,000, it's quite hard. But then once you get to that point, there is not easy, but
yeah.
it's more passive. It's organic growth.
Do you know? Well, you probably know, but do you know what topic your most cited research is on?
I can imagine free will.
Yeah, free will,
Yeah.
indeed, indeed. So where does your fascination from free will come from?
Um,
Yeah.
so actually, my fascination for free will. It started when I was doing when I was starting my actually before I started my PhD. I um, I did my master thesis during my Erasmus period in UK in Cardiff, where I was involved in a project with individuals with psychopathic traits.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big project from where my supervisor was working on, and I had a small part in it. But the project was on understanding that let's say that the emotional difficulties of criminal individuals who had psychopathic traits.
Mm-hmm.
So the goal was to measure these emotional disturbances with the experimental psychology. The question of psychopathy. I don't know if you are familiar with the concept of psychopathy.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I'm
So
interested in the same and kind of the same topics, but I'm not a researcher, so I just know whatever.
Well, so psychopathy is let's say a personality. They call it personality disorder, but anyway, it's a series of personality traits who make the individual very likely to commit crimes because of lack of empathy, because of lack of very cold feelings, or even the absence of feelings for others, very high selfishness, very manipulative.
Do you think you know psychopaths in your life? Like,
Yeah, I think I met a few. Yes, yes, yes. So the topic is very much related to the question of free will, because in the legal system, so there are some, let's say, mental states or mental or psychological traits that are used as an excuse. So if you commit a crime and you are a schizophrenic patient, there is some basis to argue that you're not responsible for your own actions. Okay. And this is never the case or it used to be never the case with psychopathic individuals, with psychopathic traits.
So it was never an excuse to, well, if you're a psychopath and you commit a crime, then you're still considered guilty because it's rational behavior on their part.
You are considered to be able to understand the reasons why you are behaving. So there is, like very, being extremely synthetic, but we can say that the individuals who commit crimes and who are psychopaths are considered to have free will. Okay, while people with a schizophrenia or severe forms of schizophrenia they are not considered to have free will when in the moment they commit a crime. I'm just really being very, very synthetic.
Yeah.
It's a very complex topic, but this was just to say where my fascination for free will came from. So I started to read into the topics, in the legal domain first, of how free will was conceptualized, what are the implications in the legal systems, and so on. And through that, then I started to do. I even did a forensic internship in forensic psychology, where I was working with forensic experts into assessing and evaluating criminals from a psychological point of view. And that's where I started being interested. And then I read a few neuroscientific articles on the topic of free will, namely the studies by Benjamin Libet. I don't know if you have ever heard of it. It's a guy who is a professor. He was, I think he passed away, a physiologist who started to investigate, to measure the brain activity and correlate it with our movements. Okay, and his reasoning was, okay, if you can draw two lines where you have a behavior on one side and the brain activity on the other side, you can compare the time of the events in these two lines. Okay, so you can see, for instance, what comes first. If first there is a brain activity and behavior, or the other way around.
Yeah, if it's like if it's a reaction of the person that is thought out or that is automatic.
Yeah, something like that. Exactly. And so that gave me the kickoff, let's say, and then I started to apply these methods and to use this method myself. And that's where my interest in free will came from.
But the result of the research then, is it that there is such a thing as free will or not? Because right now you said that psychopaths, they are considered to have free will, so they are accountable for what they do because it's rational behavior. But if free will on its own does not really exist, or at least is not measurable, then what does it mean?
This is indeed the problem. I think that after almost 10 years of research, I realized that I do not believe that neuroscience or psychology can answer the question, because whether we have free will or not it's basically a philosophical position. So either you believe it and there are some arguments for that, or you don't believe in it and there are also some arguments for that.
Yeah, but maybe it's probably more like a psychological question instead of a scientific question. I mean, there's something to say about science being able to explain everything, but I mean, some things are just not that tangible or not scientifically explainable and are just part of your, of the non-tangible or not measurable space.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's a bit like asking whether God exists or not. It's not that you can say it doesn't exist. You can't. I don't think you can prove it. So it's not a scientific question. It's a metaphysical question, or it's a philosophical question, or religious. But it's something you either believe it or not.
Yeah.
In my view.
Also, I think so on the religious side of things, it would help a lot, like globally, if we just stepped away from believing in a certain entity and more so taking the norms and values from those religions and applying those, because I kind of looked at the different religions that exist, and mostly the norms, I don't know if I'm using the right word, but the norms and values, they are kind of the same. It's just that the person on top, or the person that supposedly invented them all, is just somebody different.
I guess it's. I'm not. I have to say, I'm not really an expert of religion, but I can imagine, if it is created by the human beings. Maybe it has some, let's say, regional differences, but I can imagine that there are some, shared values, shared norms, shared features of those religions that may have different nuances, but they respond to the same needs in a way.
Yeah. I think that's the case. Yeah. So actually, Davide, I was hesitant to ask this question, but so you came from Italy, right?
Yeah.
And it's from I looked it up. It's Padua in English, I guess, but what's it called like in Italian?
Well, so I studied in Padua.
Is that where you were born?
No, it's close. No, not really. It's not far. That's where I studied. I was born and I was raised in Asiago, which is a very small town in the mountains of Italy.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not far from Padua.
Okay. How come you came to? So, was Belgium your first stop after Italy, or how did it happen?
No, but so when I was 18, when I turned 18, I went to study in Padua, which is, Asiago is a small town, and when you are 18, you want to see some big cities, and you want to, to expand your horizons. So I went to study in Padua, it's a bit like a bit bigger than Ghent, maybe, but more or less the same size. A very similar city, a big university as well. So that's where I studied. And then I developed an interest in doing research, and I started a PhD in Padua. And then in Padua, it's a 3 years program for a PhD. And in Padua, in Italy, you are kind of obliged to spend 1 year or like at least 6 months abroad during your PhD. That's a policy to increase the networking and the internationalization of the department. So from Padua, my supervisors wanted me to go to Germany. It was a psychology lab in Bochum. I don't know if you've ever been to Bochum.
Geography-wise, I'm a zero. I only know Padua is the northern of Italy because I looked it up. Otherwise, I would not have known at all.
So Bochum is a city in Germany, and I went there for 2 weeks. I was supposed to stay there for 6 months. Then after 2 weeks, I remember thinking there is no way I'm staying here.
Because
I really didn't like the.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, just the lab was great, but I couldn't see myself staying there in that environment. So I came back, and my supervisor said, "Okay, then you choose where you want to go." And then there was a professor in Ghent who I was always following because I liked his research. It was called Marcel Bras. And then I contacted him, and we had a meeting. I came to Ghent. So yeah, I really liked it there. I really liked the city. I really liked the lab. So I decided to spend my year abroad in Ghent. And then I stayed 1 year in Ghent in 2009, I think. And then I went back to Italy for a while and started to research there. But in Italy, it's if you do research, if you do academic research, it's quite normal, or people expect you to go abroad.
Okay.
It's part of in our culture, it's a bit part of what you should do if you want to become a good researcher. You should visit different labs, understand how different labs work.
What's wrong with Germany?
No, I mean, Germany has a great, amazing labs, but and also amazing cities, but I just didn't like Bochum at all. If you go there, maybe you will like it. So I don't want to spoil the city for talk badly about the city, but I just really didn't like it. So in this context, I decided to apply abroad, and I got a position in Marseille, in France, where for a postdoc, and where I stayed for 2 years. And then there was a position in Ghent. It was a very interesting position. I applied there, and I got the position. So I came back to Ghent, and that's.
Or that was later on. Was it at Impulse? Or was
No, that was later on. Yeah, I came back to the Ghent University, and where I studied. Yeah, I worked for almost 6 years, I think. Yeah. And then after that, before the end of the 6 years, I joined Impulse Research.
So how long did you work there?
1 year, I think.
Ah, okay, 1 year. And then after that, you got the idea to start your own company.
Yeah.
ICense. It's been through numerous different spellings, didn't it?
It's ICense, but because it's an acronym for International Center for Evidence-Based Neuroscientific Education.
Okay.
But it's giving some issues in terms of spelling outside in Italy, for instance, where we work as well.
And why did you start ICense?
Why did I start?
Is it your own company, or are you doing it together with other people?
So I have a business associate. So we have 2 people. We are now actually we were about to hire someone in March, but then we didn't do it because of the pandemic. So we wanted to play it a bit safe. Now we will have a person coming from January as an intern first, and then hopefully we will be able to hire her. So now it's becoming, the first year and a half, it was only 2 of us. It went very well, but now we start to have the feeling to be more really like a company. There are people coming. We have a new office in Ghent, also, by the way, from January.
I have to go and take a look.
It's in the Malta Center. I don't know if you know it.
Where is it?
The Malta Center is in the nice Western.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know. Interesting. Yeah. Actually, so at ICense, you're using a lot of different things to kind of measure brain activity and eye tracking and so on. One of them being the EEG kind of what is called EEG I'd say.
Headset, yeah.
Yeah, I did it multiple times before, but it was kind of annoying because they kind of stretch your scalp, I guess. Is it something they are improving right now, or are there already better ways to do it? And what exactly can you measure? So again, there are 2. Well, it is possible to use. Well, it depends. There are two ways to do EEG research. If you want to do it well, you have to use. At this point, you should use headsets where you still have to put. It's a gel that improves the conductance of the scalp, essentially, so that it leads to a better measurement. So the one you used was a good one in the sense that it gives a very good signal. It's very accurate. But this has the disadvantage that it takes some time. It's invasive because you need to put gel in the head of the people, and it also requires some high level knowledge to treat the data. Or you can use more commercial EEG headsets. Let's say headsets where, like they call it, with dry electrodes, where you don't need to use any gel. These have the quality of the signal is much lower. You can use it in some cases, but it's the quality is lower. And it's measuring the electrical currents, I guess, in your brain. Is that correct? That are flowing through it.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the solution by Elon Musk, Neuralink?
Which one?
So it's actually it's an implant that they will put in your, well, on top of your brain, or actually in your brain, and it has electrodes that will go into the brain, and then their idea is to kind of cure Alzheimer or motoric
Yeah.
issues by sending the brain electrical impulses. So
Yeah.
it's not. I think in the demo they showed the brain activity of pigs in a live video. But do you think it will be commonplace in the near future to have something like this for people that have issues in one
Well, I think for clinical purposes, that's definitely a huge improvement. I think. Well, it is used already, this technique. So to implanted electrodes for Parkinson's disease or some form of dementia. I think that's great. Of course,
How is it used
there
for
are.
Parkinson's disease?
Hmm?
How is it used for Parkinson's disease?
I'm not. Yeah, I don't know the details really very deeply, but it basically acts on parts of the brain that are less functional during if you have a Parkinson's disease.
Oh,
Then by stimulating those nuclei, so those brain regions, you kind of you simulate a normal brain, so to speak.
but is it commonplace already? I don't think so, right?
It has been tested, but of course there are some ethical questions. Because once once you get in touch with the brain of people, I mean, this knowledge is very powerful, but as all the powerful things can also be used in the wrong way. But on the other hand, I mean, per se, I think it's a huge opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. Also, I think people probably underestimate already what the brain can do on its own, like even without extra electricity impulses or something like that. Like the way you think and the way you handle your internal monologue. I think probably not for Parkinson or stuff like that, but for mental problems, I guess that you could help yourself a lot by just changing the way you think. And I like at this point in time, I feel like medicine is always used as something that happens after you have the problems, instead of teaching people how to prevent those kind of things.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, of course. But that's also talking about biases. If you go back to the beginning of the conversation, that's the human brain is reactive. Is not always proactive. I mean, to prevent things, you need to requires a lot of effort. And if our brain is wired in a way to avoid effort as much as possible. So
Is that why
we
people
only
are
make the
lazy?
effort. Huh?
Is that why people are lazy?
Yeah, I mean, we only make effort if it is strictly necessary, and so that's why if we are in pain, then we act. If you are not in pain, it's more difficult. It's not impossible, but it's more difficult. It requires more strategies and more proactive.
Yeah. Well, I guess that kind of explains laziness and procrastination. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that something you also have to deal with?
I have to deal with that. Since I have the company, I have to say it's automatically, you are in a state of constant, I don't know, kind of primordial fear. I don't know how to explain it, but you don't procrastinate because you don't have you're never lazy actually.
So it's the fear of like failing then, failing.
I think ultimately, yeah, it's more like a survival instinct. You know, you have to. Uh,
Oh, okay. You're kind of like connected with the company as if it was an organism, so to speak.
it's more like about like you know, yeah. I always make. I was used to all my life having a salary, and so at the end of the month you get the money. No matter what you do, you get the money at the end of the month, which is great. But it has the downside for me that I don't feel that all necessarily the challenge in this with this system. So I become lazy and I procrastinate.
It's not a
So
challenge because you have the safety of getting paid no matter what, or it's not a challenge because the work in itself wasn't challenging.
yeah, that's a good question. I think a bit of both. I think a bit of both. I lost, in that case, my specific case, I lost the passion a little bit. Um, but I think the moment when I stopped having a salary, especially the first months were a bit, I was getting adjusted to it. I didn't have money at all, and the need to find an income keeps you awake in a way, but literally at night, but also keeps you alive. And I think ultimately this is driven by some sort of fear. Like the basic emotion is kind of fear mixed with, also happiness because you're on your own. It's really exciting.
And
But it's
gratifying if you achieve something as well, or more gratifying.
yeah, there's no. I mean, there are much more highs and much more lows, and the highs and the lows are like the difference between the highs and the lows is huge.
Yeah.
That's I think for me at least my life as an employee was a bit more flat in terms of emotional activation.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine that's the case. I think like having a life that's like that is just. I mean, some people are okay with stagnation. I guess like at some point in your life, people are more okay with it than before that. But I think, and it's the same like you, except I still work for a company and not on my own.
I mean, I think you can also find excitement in other ways outside your job, for instance. There are people I know, they are very driven, but they just want to have a normal job, so to speak, so that they can also do other things. That, I mean, I also, understand that. It's just that I think it also depends on the phase of life. There are some moments in your life where you want to focus on something else. There are moments where you, at least that's in my case, I want to secure my economies also for the future in a way that is. I don't think it's easy to achieve by having even a well-paid job.
So
See, like
one of the reasons is that you can make more or build up faster if you do it on
it's more
yourself.
risky, but if it goes
Bonus
well,
or bigger. Yeah.
the amount of the income can be much higher.
Okay.
Can be. I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be, but it can be much higher.
Yeah. Some people just aren't looking for high risks, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it's totally fine. I think it's very personal. It depends on what makes people alive or make feel alive.
So how do you continue doing that in your personal life? Do you prefer than having it being flat or also with ups and highs?
No, now I really don't regret my choice. It's really not flat. I mean, it's never flat because as I said, there are moments that are very low, like when you feel I mean, it can happen. I don't know that you lose a client or that a proposal get rejected. or that you have 1 week where you don't have anything happening, nothing happens. And then it's because you start to go, your mind goes a bit too far into the negative thoughts. But then you also have the very high, when in 1 week you get clients, and then you see everything, you see yourself at the top of the world. I think with time you also learn to balance these two. So you handle the highs and the lows much better. I think that's what I'm learning, I think. I'm less dependent on what happens. What matters is that there are some that you're going in the right direction.
You're more looking at the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of
You have to
picking one event.
Basically, the thing is, at least the challenge, or one of the challenges, is to find the balance between your ambitions and to have a realistic view on the reality. Because if you are being ambitious, of course, is good. Being too ambitious leads to a lot of frustration if it doesn't match the reality, or if you're not realistic. So I think balancing the two is a good way to work.
And the ambition of building your own company and getting it big, is it something you had all your life, or is it just a recent?
No, it's quite recent. No, it's quite recent. I think it's I don't know, 4 or 5 years. I'm thinking. So when I was at the end of when I was still at Ghent University, I realized that I would have liked maybe to have to try this, just for being able to say to myself that I could make it. In a way.
And you have your own company now, so.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. It's very good that we are still alive, because the last year, as you know, it was really not easy. Luckily, I mean, also most companies fail the first year. So I'm really happy that we are still there, that we are actually going. I'm very positive about the next year. But I haven't achieved anything yet. It's really, I think, it's a long process. But I mean, I achieved that. I'm still there, but there's still a lot of things to do.
You beat the statistics already.
Yeah. It's a good. Yeah, indeed, the numbers are good statistically.
So since you're in the neuroscience space, and you learned a lot about the brain and heuristics and biases, like, does it help you or does not help you at all in your regular life, like to do things or to learn things or stuff like that?
No, I think it to some extent it helps. As I said before, at least knowing that the way your brain works, of course, even if you're not perfect, I mean, you're not always aware of your mistakes, but sometimes you are more aware maybe than other people who know nothing about it. Is that definitely helpful?
How do you keep your knowledge about the subject up to date?
Yeah,
because I can imagine there's new research coming out every day or every week.
It's very difficult to keep track. This is one of the main problems I had last year, because I started the company, so there are many other activities that you need to do, from accountancy, finding an office, paying the bills, finding the clients, doing the projects, teaching. So you don't have really much time to keep yourself up to date. I didn't have much time. I hope I do it when I teach sometimes. I try to, to read or to include at least one article in my classes, each class that is recent. But it's not always easy.
And do you still read books, or are they all out of date at this point? Because there's a bookshelf full of books behind you.
Yeah, this is the bookshelf of my brother actually. I'm now in Switzerland in his office. So these are all architecture books.
Okay.
Um, but no, the books are always still they are always related a bit to what I do. But I'm reading, which is now I'm reading a book by actually finished. I started reading last year, but it's a book by Dan Ariely. It's called Predictably Irrational.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, which is also a kind of a classic. I'm a bit. I should have read it already. I mean, some concepts I know them already, but the way he writes is really, really intriguing.
Is that the only book you're reading right now, or have read in the last few months, or are there any other good recommendations that you have?
There is a book, but it's more about something a bit different. It's about.
Could be anything. Could be related to your field, or it could be just for your own pleasure, or just an interest that you have.
This book is more like let's say a life coach book. About it's a bit kind of a. It didn't look like that from the cover. It's an Italian book, but it's a bit a hippie book. It's really interesting because it combines elements from the Eastern philosophy with the Western philosophy. But it does some nice, interesting ideas. It's about how to have a more fulfilling everyday life. Let's say.
Okay. Can you send me the title afterwards? I'm curious.
Yes.
I'll read some kind of summary about it. Interesting. Did you also study philosophy then, or because you mentioned philosophy a lot, but
yeah, no. I studied it at the high school, and then it's more a personal interest, but I never had a systematic, reading or knowing about philosophy. It's more about some, yeah. But also the topic of free will was, of course, related to philosophy.
yeah. That was because so you researched that topic because you had to do it for a company or somebody else, right? It's not like you completely. It was not out of free will that you investigated the topic. So one of the other things that you actually mentioned in one of the publications, and I couldn't wrap my head around, is if I can read it correctly, is a mimicry vs automatic imitation. If you still, it might be an older article. I'm not sure.
Can you say it again?
Mimicry vs automatic imitation.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Well, I was. It was I was a co-author of that article. I think I'm not the first author.
Okay.
It was I think a review or meta-analysis paper where we tested whether there are two concepts in social psychology and cognitive psychology that are very similar, but they have been treated by different researchers with different methods, so mimicry and automatic imitation. So the human tendency to imitate others, and so what are the factors that influence this psychological trait, phenomenon? So the idea was to test the different threads of research to compare them, whether they actually indicate the same results, the same findings.
Yeah. And I think they said that it is not the same.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's all, because all the articles are behind a paywall, so I can just read the summary. and that's it. Uh, it's a bit harder if you're interested in some topics and you want to get in deep. You almost always have to pay. So yeah, that's a bit annoying. But yeah. So one of the projects I also saw that you did is measuring the goosebump factor for a song.
Yeah.
So can you explain that project a little bit? It was for Joe FM, I think.
Yeah. It was a project we did with Impulse Research. So yeah, the idea was actually it was very innovative idea. It was to so Joe FM had the top 10 songs based on the listeners, the radio listeners, and they wanted to know whether we can predict the ranking based on neuroscientific parameters. So what we did was we tested different people while they were listening to these songs, and we measured their brain activity. We measured their skin conductance, so their level of arousal. We measured their heart rate. We measured their facial expression. So we measured a lot of different parameters. And we try to analyze these parameters, so to integrate all these parameters and try to predict how they would, try to predict the actual ranking. So that was the project. We tested, I think, more than 10 people who are supposed to be, who are very known in Flanders. As I'm not, I didn't have a TV, and I don't watch TV, so I actually didn't know them, but apparently there were some very famous people that we tested there. But one I knew he was the guy from the Hooverphonics.
Oh yeah.
It's Gaillet, I think he's called Gaillet.
I don't know his name, but he shaved his beard, so he's unrecognizable.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, anyway, so that's he was the only one I knew, and that was basically the idea.
Did you only do it with the top 10 songs, or also with other songs that are lower in the ranking to see if they also have the same?
No, we only did it with the top 10.
Okay, and did you get to the same ranking? If you
not exactly the same ranking, but it was quite close.
Oh,
yeah, actually, it was quite close.
But so the ranking could help to predict, but also isn't it also just very closely related to what people voted to before? Like if people voted a lot for Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, which was on 1, and actually I think this year it's not, but I'm not sure which song is. So if they voted for the song before, then they will just vote for it year after year.
Yeah, that I don't know. That could be another project. You can suggest that to Joe FM people.
Yeah, I just if you have an ID box, I'll just drop all my research IDs, and then you can do that. Yeah, actually, I also participated in another study of yours, I think, which was the product placement study. And then I had to take participants through watching different Flemish series to see whether they looked at the brands that appeared during the episodes, and if they could actually recall them afterwards. And I think, like most people, their eyes kind of looked at them, but afterwards they couldn't really remember it. But do you still think that it's a valid thing to do to actually have those brands in there, even though they can't remember it? Because subconsciously they will buy them more if they see them afterwards, even though they haven't really seen them consciously?
Yeah, that's a good question. Whether the brand recall is a good proxy for future behavior. It is not clear whether what they call unconscious priming, so whether having a perception, or having not remembering consciously something can still have an impact.
Mm-hmm.
Research is kind of a bit ambiguous on that. I think there is some. If it is perceived, so when you items that are perceived by the human eye are to some extent processed. If you pay enough attention to them. So I think that's already tell that there is some influence, or that it is likely that there is some influence. The fact that they don't recall the brains may not be, in my opinion, is not a crucial variable.
So, I don't know, maybe they've already done some kind of research on it, but do you think they already done some research where they show images and then so they recognize or don't recognize the brand, whatever, and then they track kind of spending habits about the brands that they saw over a period of time to see whether they subconsciously buy it more?
I'm sure that there is some research showing that. Honestly, I'm completely aware of any recent research that tries to address specifically this issue. But I'm pretty sure that there are some research papers there.
Interesting. I'm looking at my list of questions that I had prepared that I definitely want to ask you to see whether there are any other ones that I really want to ask you. I have most of them, but let's see. So last time I asked Maarten, who was the first guest on the podcast, if he had a question that he wanted to ask himself and could answer himself, or if he had a question himself directed to me that I should answer. So if you have one, it's your time to kind of ask it. He also told me next. Sorry?
Can I first ask you, because I know Maarten, what was the question that he asked himself?
No. So he asked the question, but it was directed to me.
Okay.
So, and he also told me, next time you do this, make sure you let them know beforehand, because it's hard to come up with a question on the spot. But still, I forgot to ask you beforehand, so I'm sorry for that.
I have two questions. One is, what are your resolutions for the 2021?
Ooh, resolutions. I'll
In
read out the question while I think about it. Do you believe in New Year's resolutions?
It depends on they don't have an effect by themselves, but I do believe that, for instance, I write down some of the resolutions. It helps keeping the focus in a way.
Yeah. It helps. Actually, so there's one resolution I almost write down even weekly, monthly, or every year, is to not hit the snooze button so many times. Just when my alarm goes, just get up. And I don't want to do too many resolutions because you need to have some focus.
Yes.
So that would be a very nice one to finally get rid of. Is to
you should watch a TED talk by, she's a woman, I don't remember her name, but it's about the 5 seconds rule. I don't know if you know it.
So you can explain it.
She argues that I honestly sometimes use this rule in my head. So she argues that our brain is, in a way, when you have to take a decision, you should never wait more than 5 seconds, because after 5, imagine the example that you mentioned, you are in bed and you are pondering okay, should I go stand up? Should I stay in bed? So the moment you pass the 5 seconds, your brain starts to make excuses not to stand up, so to go for the lazy option. Okay, so making the decision before that those 5 seconds, then it's much more likely that you do the right thing. But it's a very interesting TED talk. I mean, it's based on also research.
Yeah, I'll watch that one because I can use
I will,
actually.
I will send you the link.
Ah, great, great. Actually, for some time I had so I read lots, but I'm not too big of a fan of audiobooks. I don't know why. I just prefer reading, I guess. But I listened to the audiobook of David Goggins. I don't know if you heard of the guy before, but he's
but I didn't read or didn't listen to the book.
Yeah, he's a Navy SEAL, I think, and his discipline is through the roof. And actually, there's a part of his book or some kind of motivational speech, and I downloaded the audio for it, and then I put it as an alarm to get up. But I got annoyed after a few days because it's a very aggressive way to kind of get up. He's like, I'll count to 5, and if you don't get up by the count of 5, and then I mean, yeah, it works. It works for 2 or 3 times, and then you're like, God damn, man, can't you just say good morning or something? That would be nice too.
Yeah, indeed.
No, but yeah, snoozing is one, and let's see, resolutions.
That's a very concrete.
Yeah, resolution. It's also a reoccurring one.
Yes.
So, do you have any?
My resolutions for 2021 are, I'm still thinking these days. That's why I asked you, because I'm still in the process of thinking. But one is for sure is to to do a half marathon.
Okay.
Last year, I mean, that was one of the good things about the lockdown, that I had to restart doing a lot of sport. So I started running almost from scratch. As you know, I had, last 2019, I had bad back issues. And since January, February, this year, I started running again, and then the back was perfect. I'm also doing a lot of core muscles exercises, so to keep it protected. And it's became kind of a passion. So I'm running regularly, and I would like to do a half marathon.
Okay, and do you have plans for a full marathon then after that?
Well, I will see. I think that the step between half marathon is feasible for me right now. A marathon definitely not at this moment, but I don't know. It's really a different, I think, type of effort.
Yeah, I think marathon is also more a mental challenge, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because they say if you can run 20 kilometers, then you can also run 40, but...
of course, I mean, you can, but
like
it's...
but
I mean, the thing is, running, I didn't expect it, but it became kind of addictive, can be quite addictive. So I don't exclude that. For now, I don't see it as realistic to do a marathon, but maybe in the future, yes.
So addictive, like because you had the runner's high, or?
Yeah, because I see, especially when you combine it with you feel really great when you are in a good shape. And running is also, especially since my job or our job, our life is really digital, and I'm constantly from the computer. Running is really like, it sets my mind really free. So it's a moment where I'm alone with myself and I really enjoy it. There is one aspect, and that the other aspect is really the competition with yourself. When you combine with a Fitbit, and then you see that you're improving, you kind of want to improve more and more. You want to have a better pace. You want to have a better performance. So that's a kind of an addictive part a little bit.
But while I was running, so I ran with Strava, I think it's called, and then you can also see the progress of people that are running at around the same, or that are running the same distances as you, and see the circle kind of go around the route that you take. And like next time I'm going to be faster than them.
I know. I'm going to run very often with he's a good friend of mine in Brussels. He's a bit slightly more in shape than I am, so he's a bit more a better runner. And that's perfect because it's he's going, and then for me that's a big challenge. So I want to to follow him and to be on the same pace, or the same pace. And for him, he also doesn't want to be that I catch up. So it's also motivating for him.
He improves and you improve at the same time.
So I think that's a very good combination.
So if you're not running with a friend, do you run with music in?
Sometimes, sometimes. But otherwise, just alone, without anything.
And then you're not thinking of anything, or?
Well, no. At the beginning, I think about several things, like mostly work, or if I'm alone. But then after half an hour, 25 minutes, I don't think much. It becomes more challenging, especially Brussels has, I do more always run in the same area, and it's a kind of a geographical thing. So in the first half of the run, it's kind of easy because you go downhill, and then I have to come back, and sometimes it's really the inclination is quite high. So the last part you just want to get there because it's really going up. And then you want to just arrive at the end.
You like living in Brussels better than in Ghent, or?
Overall, yes. I mean, Brussels, it's what I like is that it's a bit more I feel culture more integrated in a way. It's actually Brussels doesn't have the identity of Brussels is a bit it's kind of a lack of identity.
It's a mix of.
It's a mix of everything, and then you become part of the city in a way. So you feel part of this network. While in Ghent there is, I think, a bit stronger identity. I mean, people in Ghent, it's very clear what it means to be from Ghent, or what it means to live in Ghent. It's a Flemish city, although it's international, but mostly students.
Yeah, I was going to say there are a lot of different cultures in Ghent as well.
Yeah, that's true.
More in Brussels,
that's true. But I think from the outside there is let's say a cultural majority, and then you feel it's not a big guy. Just because of the size of people, I always felt a bit like an external. To this majority, there is a kind of a dominance, not in the sense that people are dominant, but it's in the sense that there is a dominant culture, which is difficult to. It's I mean, I like it, and I get along well with it, but I'm not part of it.
Is it because the culture is defined more because there's a lot of students there, or is that not the culture that you think?
Also, it's a combination. So, but first of all, that's the second aspect. I think it's that there are a lot of students, so mainly a student city, or there is a big part of the city which is a student life, and I'm not a student anymore. yeah, yeah, it's a bit, yeah, I find more aligned with the activity that I see in Brussels, with the like type of people that are around in Brussels. That's the age part, but it's also the cultural part, in the sense that Ghent is still, I see it as a beautiful city, and it's a Flemish city, you see.
Okay, yeah.
And I mean, obviously, I mean, I live in Belgium for almost 10 years, so I obviously have nothing against the Flemish cities. But I cannot become Flemish, you see.
Yeah, yeah.
I was not raised there. I didn't grow up in Flanders, so I will always feel a bit an external element to the majority.
So you feel more like a kind of a citizen of the world then, instead of like an Italian or a Belgian or
yeah, exactly. I mean, in Brussels, you feel like sometimes you don't even ask, or where you come from. It doesn't really matter, because you become kind of a part of this multi-ethnic, multicultural city, and it's very interesting to be part of it, because yeah, you kind of contribute to make the city. You see to make
yeah,
it a
yeah,
culture of the city.
yeah. I can imagine the appeal to living in Brussels if you're not Belgian or Flemish, then I guess. But personally, in Brussels, I don't know, why do I not like it? It's more the environment, I think. Everything is like dirty.
That said, I mean, Brussels is very. It's what I miss sometimes from Ghent is the ease of living. In Ghent, it's very easy to live. If you want to go, take the car and go somewhere to the supermarket, and just take it in 5 minutes, you're there. If you want to meet somebody, even if it is on the other side of the city, it's still can walk or take a bike. In Brussels, you need a lot. Yeah, you need to organize yourself. Some parts of the cities are ugly. Some parts of the cities are amazing, I think, very green. So it's very complex. There is no unity of Brussels. It's really complex and a heterogeneous city. So you need to get used to that. But going back, I think I totally understand the Flemish perspective of Brussels, because I think it's not normal that as a people from Flanders, you go to your capital, and sometimes people don't speak your language. That from a Flemish perspective, that I completely understand that you don't see that close. Like I could be Antwerp, for instance, or other big cities.
Do you speak English there or French?
Mostly French. Sometimes English, sometimes even when we actually when I go out for my social life, I like to go to the Flemish neighborhood, and there you kind of it's more about ordering drinks and food, so I can handle. So that's mainly Dutch.
How's your Dutch?
Huh?
How's your Dutch?
It's, well, actually, I think it's a bit improving, because in this the last year I also have a position at the VUB, contract at VUB. So I used a lot of the offices there, and there is a kind of researchers who are bilingual, and French and Dutch. We normally speak in French, but sometimes I'm also very exposed to Dutch, and I sometimes interact. When I have to say basic things, I can speak Dutch a little bit. But yeah, I'm exposed also to them talking a lot.
Yeah.
So the understanding is also improving.
You were pretty sure that this podcast would have been in English then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I wouldn't be able to have a very deep conversation in Dutch.
I get. Well, maybe we could do one in French someday.
Yeah, I can. Yes, that I could. Yes.
Is your French any good?
Well, I lived in France for 2 years, and
Oh, okay.
there I had to learn French. When I was in Ghent, I lost it a little bit, the accent and
Mm,
the fluency. Now that I'm back in Brussels, it came back
mm.
very easily.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of using it again. If you once learned the constructions, it's more about the constructions, I think, than it is about the vocabulary, because
Yes.
vocabulary you can just pick up again, but like rules on how to build sentences and so on, it has to be kind of second nature. But if you learn it once, then
Yeah.
it should be fine, I think. All right, awesome. So, was this kind of your expectancy for the length of the podcast, or?
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, I could go on and on, but I don't know if you have other
I don't.
things you want to go.
I don't have any specific questions anymore. But, do you listen to podcasts yourself?
Yes, I have one podcast in particular who I listen to basically every day. It's an Italian one.
Ah,
It's yeah, but I listen to it since I don't know, it's 5 years or 6 years.
what is it about?
But it's they talk about it's 1 hour and a half long, more or less. They talk about events of the day, politics, yeah, interesting facts.
Mm-hmm.
But the typical feature of the podcast is that it's extremely so the guy is very liberal. It's you can call and say your own opinion, even in very aggressive terms, even if you are I don't know I exaggerate, but not exaggerate because it happens. But even if you are a Nazi or a neo-Nazi,
Mm-hmm.
you can call and give your opinion, and then there is a discussion.
Mm-hmm.
It can quite fierce the discussion, but it's very free. I really like it because you can really think, you can really hear what people actually think and feel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I
Very
think
unfiltered.
mm-hmm. It was also kind of like that with the Joe Rogan podcast. He also, but I think that's already a little bit curated, because he does tend to have people on there that are mostly like him, like just the way he thinks. But since you've been bought by Spotify, I think it will be even more so, because he has to take into account the people at
Yeah,
Spotify as well.
yeah,
So, but at some point, I would love this podcast to kind of be like that as well. Uh,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
we
But
can do. Hmm?
that would be interesting to have. Yeah, no, I think it's one reason why I don't I stopped watching the TV is because I think the TV most programs they need to adapt to a big audience, and therefore the opinions, what people say, I see it as very fake. See,
Mm-hmm.
and I like this politics because it's real, it's authentic,
Yeah.
and I think it's very a good exercise to listen and have discussion with people who can have ideas that you think are crazy,
Mm-hmm.
that can be even completely wrong. But I think people should have the freedom to say whatever they have in mind.
Mm. Yeah, I believe that should be the case. Yeah. On TV, they seem to be very cautious about not offending people or something like that. And also, like if you see an interview on television, like everything is very curated. Like the person who is being interviewed, they know the questions beforehand most of the time. They can think about what they have to say, and then yeah, it takes away the authenticity. That's also why I I never want to give the questions to the person I am going to talk to, because then they can already filter it, or yeah, reword it in a way that would be less. I mean, if
Yeah,
it would be offensive, then But yeah, I don't mind. It seems to be more important to just be able to talk freely about any topic and to be able to listen what the other person thinks about it. Not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to agree with the point. That's not, I mean, that's not the reason why I'm doing it, but it's always interesting to see both views on a certain kind of topic. We didn't really have that kind of topic in this podcast, I think, because I mean you're the neuro expert and I'm just very interested in what you have to say. But yeah, probably at some point there will be topics that both of the people are very enthusiastic about and maybe have an opposing view, and then I hope it will become a good conversation as well. But a thing like this, I don't think will ever be able to survive on regular television. I would like to see it on regular television, but
Yeah,
won't
yeah.
happen.
I mean, the also the I think the idea that I think sometimes the conversation can also go, or like let's say in the television they never go to the personal level, or when they do go to the personal level, they are at least talking about the television that I know a bit more, which is the Italian television. They tend to be overly dramatic, and they are kind of also not fake. So I think a way to really represent reality in a more authentic way. So what actually people think, unfiltered from socially desirable answers, from strategic responses. That's something that is, I think there is a huge gap in our society. That's why I listen to this podcast every day, because it fills that gap for me.
Yeah, and also like complex topics. Some topics can't just be explained. Like for example, I followed some of the presidential debates. So Biden against Trump, and there was a moderator that, well, or at least she tried to shut off the microphone after 2 minutes after somebody was explaining something. So can you imagine being asked about universal basic income, for example, and they ask you, do you think it's good or bad? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
That's, I mean, but also people, I mean, it must be that people don't want to know in depth what they are talking about, because otherwise there would be some kind of space for it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think that the challenge is to make what is difficult. I think to make people engaged, like to keep them, listening. I mean, the topics and the content has to be interesting, and that's I think also a very difficult thing to achieve.
Yeah. So, well, I don't know what your habit is when you are listening to a podcast, but sometimes I just put it on and then you don't necessarily listen attentively to everything that is said, but then at some point you are triggered by some opinion or something they said, and then you just rewind like a few minutes
Yeah,
and
that's
listen
true.
more
That's true.
attentively
Yeah.
to it. Because, I mean, at some point, if you're having a 2 hour conversation, maybe like this one, you're not always like 100%. So, and that's okay. I mean, that's not to be expected from people, I think. But at least if it's a podcast, you can always rewind to the part that you like and that you want to learn more about. And maybe some neuroscientific insights could help into making long form podcasts interesting for a broader public. Maybe that's a next research topic. I don't know. But actually, are you sitting in a room with no windows, or?
Yeah, there are windows.
Because the lighting is very even.
Because it's dark outside.
Yeah. I know I have Of course, I have windows, but there's no light coming in from outside right now.
Here we are. I'm in the middle of like in Switzerland. It's a very quiet in the countryside, so there is no light at all outside.
Nice, nice. All right, then I hope you can enjoy the nice countryside a little bit longer. How long are you staying in Switzerland?
I don't have. I think yeah, beginning of January. I don't know. I'm here by car, so
Okay.
I'm
You can
flexible.
leave anytime.
Yeah.
All right. Well, David, it's been
Yeah.
very nice talking to you. I really
That's
enjoyed
good.
the time. And
Thanks for inviting me.
yeah, thank you very much for being the second guest on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And
Yeah,
I
and
hope we can talk again
yeah,
soon with a nice beer or wine or any
yeah.
alcoholic drink.
Yes, I think wine. I think, but
Wine? All right, that's great. Thank you, David.
okay.
Bye.